Oh, okay. Well, it's pretty late actually in some parts of the United States. It's tomorrow, and I'll be doing lesson number 301. But while I had a little time tonight after the baseball game, I wanted to just say a little bit about lesson 300. Um, Only an instant does this world endure. Remember, we're looking at this in relationship to the real world, which is another section that we would have read prior to doing this lesson today. So only an instant does this world endure. And there's an interesting line um, in the first little section of this that I want to get to. But after I read this and I was sitting here, and I'm not going to belabor this tonight since it's late, but I remember prior to my awakening and prior to the experience of salvation and prior to my saying yes to Jesus, and this this is part of this lesson as well. We seek your holy world today, for we, your loving sons, had lost our way a while, but we have listened to your voice and learned exactly what to do to be restored to heaven and our true identity. Yes, and that was the nature of what I was told in that revelation. Jesus told me, you're not going to have to do this anymore, and there will be directions, and if you follow directions, you're not going to have to do this anymore. But what I wanted to say was prior to that, and this goes into the first part, prior to that, this thought, only an instant does this world endure. This is a thought which can be used to say that death and sorrow are the certain lot of all who come here, for their joys are gone before they are possessed or even grasped. And it's true, prior to the experience that I was blessed to have of the certainty of the accomplishment of salvation, and prior to the revelation of the truth of who I am as one with the Father, prior to that, when I began to think about something, and I would go in, I don't think I was a depressed person. I just think that the rationale that I was utilizing, based on the view I had of the world, from thinking the world had something to do with what I was seeing, um, and I had to live within the world as it was being viewed by my body's eyes, let's say. Everything seemed to end in death, so it didn't matter what I thought about or which direction I headed or what I thought there might be to pursue. It all roads led to death, and to me, it just didn't make any sense, because it doesn't matter what you're going to do here, you were going to die, and you were no longer going to get the benefit from whatever the hell it is you had accomplished. No matter what it was you accomplished, it would end the same way. And that's what he's saying here, that death and sorrow are the certain lot of all who come here, for their joys are gone before they're possessed. Yes, that was entirely true. And no matter what road my mind went down in thinking, it always ended in death after the experience of salvation and revelation, when I discovered the reality of my eternal self and the infinite nature of the universe as God creates, and that nature being what love is. I recognized that by the following of directions and based on the experience of salvation, that because salvation, we're one mind, we share the same mind, we share one mind, okay, in that sense. We share a single self, okay? It doesn't matter what the fragmentation seems to make us look like in any number. Salvation is from the idea that we could be separate, because that's an impossibility, okay? So if we're sharing a single self, and that single self in any regards achieves salvation, then the entirety of that self must achieve salvation, especially when two minds join together in it for its purpose. Nothing can stand against it. So when I recognized what salvation was and joined with Jesus, I saw that the end of the world as we know it was imminent, and everyone would come to the conclusion and experience that I had come to as well, and would recognize they were saved. And in that sense, we were saved from an illusion of death, and therefore we knew as one that we were eternal. Now, that's how my thinking goes right now. The miraculous nature of the thinking that I engage in right now is based on my certainty that you and I are saved. Life is eternal. We are what life is, and there is nothing outside of that life as love created by our Father and shared with us. And this we can for sure know. And this world does endure for only an instant, because when you recognize, I don't know how to say this, as Jesus speaks of himself as the Alpha and Omega, when you recognize yourself as that Alpha and Omega, you can see that the world could not have ever been real, so never endured more than the instant it seemed to in the dream that you have now left behind and will never be able to dream again. So in that sense, it talks about in the Course as the tiny tick of time. Like, tick never talked. Before it talks, we will have returned, and time will never have been. We seek your holy world today, the replacement world for the one of death, the replacement world where all of us come to recognize the nature of who we are and fulfill our function in God's plan by achieving salvation of man and mankind. And in that, the restoration of the joy of the kingdom as being who and what we are begins to register on the faces of the illusory bodies that we are utilizing to fulfill our function, quite frankly because the light that we experience as our reality and the ability to be true to the visions that come once our spiritual eye has been reopened to that light, allow us the joy of recognizing that guilt and fear were all a mistake and have nothing to do with who we really are. And through forgiveness, we are restored to not only the recognition, but the experience of our wholeness and our innocence. So only an instant will this endure, but there's another instant. Yet this is also the idea that lets no false perception keep us in its hold, okay? Because we know, based on our understanding and our willingness to accept this teaching, that what's real can't be threatened and what's unreal doesn't exist. So anything that can be threatened, therefore anything that is part of the temporal nature of the sequential experience of time, can't be true because it has a beginning and an end, and God created not beginning and ending because God is infinite, and therefore so are you and I. So we can utilize the idea that only an instant does this world endure as a way of truing up our mind in the recognition of, let's say the simple phrase, what's real can't be threatened, what's unreal doesn't exist. If that's true, then anything of space and time is unreal and therefore does not exist and cannot threaten who we are. Now we have something to look at, evaluate, like the Holy Spirit teaches by comparisons, in other words. And the comparison being made is anything that's temporal, okay, anything that only endures an instant cannot be reality. Now, we could look at that and be hit with a depression at the futility of even attempting to accomplish anything here and now, or we can use that in an honest way of looking at the life that we've been leading with the recognition that because it only endures for an instant, we can right-mindedly pursue eternity through the release of our beliefs in the fact that we think this world and the body is what our reality is. Okay? So we can utilize it as a truth to hold up our thinking to in order to see what thinking needs to be released in the recognition of the fact that life is eternal and this temporal world of space and time, not being eternal, has no reality and therefore cannot keep us from the recognition of who we are, because an illusion cannot prevent you from knowing the truth unless you desire the illusion above the truth. And we would go beyond that tiny instant to eternity. And this is the process and the practice that we've been given to achieve that. And like I said, in each moment when I look into my mind at the thoughts that even are contained within the world, the idea of what goes on in the world, I am certain that because this world only endures for an instant, and I have recognized my own salvation and the salvation of the world, okay, that we all do go beyond this tiny instant of recognizing time and death and sorrow as being false, and us mistaken about the meaning that we gave it. It only takes a tiny instant for us to see that and go beyond it to recognize who we are as eternal and live to the eternal truth of what we glimpsed in that transcendence. Jesus says somewhere in the Course, what you envisioned, you will make manifest. So if you can envision eternity in your mind as the logical outcome for the nature of what's occurring within this process of awakening, then you will make that manifest in your experience, even here within your heart and mind, and you will no longer be fooled by this space-time identity that seems to participate in a game of death simply because your mind and your heart are identified with that game as being real. And that is what we're letting go of and leaving behind.